Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is video 5 from the Beginner to Chessmaster playlist, which is a progressive series of videos. And we're going to have a look at what to do in a chess opening. There are 3 stages to a chess game, 3 phases: the opening, middle game, end game. Our focus in this video will be on the opening. So what should we do during it? What we should do is build a combative structure and develop efficiently. Now, what do I mean by this? What do I mean exactly when I say build a combative structure? I have a couple things in mind when I say this, and they both refer to the pawns and how they interact with one another. More specifically, I'm talking about creating and or challenging a pawn duo. We'll see exactly what I mean by a pawn duo soon enough. And also, we're looking to make a pawn break if needed. The term pawn break is one we covered already, in video 4 to be exact. We'll see how that ties into the opening. And when I say develop efficiently, I'm talking about getting our pieces out to active squares, having them placed on squares where they have many options. We're looking to get castled. When I say develop efficiently, we're looking to get castled so our king is safe. And also, we don't want to waste any time. We don't want to move the same piece multiple times in the early stage of the game, but rather get all of our pieces out and have them contribute. There's a big reason why I chose the word efficient. I wanted to draw your attention to not only getting the pieces to active squares, but also not wasting any time. Okay. Now, we're going to see several examples of this in action. We're going to see several examples of what I mean by building a combative structure and developing efficiently so that we can have a better feel for how the opening should be playing out. Okay. Before I get into the specifics, before I get into the examples, let me first start with a definition. What exactly am I referring to when I say pawn duo? Well, this right here is a pawn duo. A pawn duo is when you have 2 pawns on the same rank right next to each other. This is what we might call a D and E pawn duo. This is also known as an ideal pawn center. It's another term we could be using, but from here on out I'll be referring to it as a pawn duo. It's the most common pawn duo in chess, having both of your central pawns up on your 4th rank. If we're to look at it from black's perspective, just making some passing moves, some dummy moves on the white side, this would be the ideal pawn center or the pawn duo. For black, to both central pawns up to the 4th rank here. Let's go back here to the white side. What is it about this pawn duo that is so good? Let's look at what it is doing. Drawing a lot of attention, I realize, to the pawns. They are worth the least in the game, but that is no indication of how important they are. They are most important. We might regard them as the blueprint in chess. They are going to provide instructions to our other pieces. They'll help our other pieces know where they belong. They will be particularly useful to our bishops. Our bishops will be our pawns. How they are positioned will influence where our bishops belong. And making pawn breaks will influence the major pieces, the rooks and the queens. They will be helpful to creating open files or half-open files. Let's have a look at what this pawn duo is currently doing from here. Just clearing the board there. What squares are being controlled? Let's see right off the bat here. They're controlling 4 squares. That's nice, but it's not just that. This is 4 squares in the enemy position, and that could be quite inconvenient. We can be sure that pieces of greater value will not be making use of those squares. These pawns can take them out. But that's not the only thing that makes a pawn duo so strong. It's not just the squares they control, but also what they could do, what prospects they have, the flexibility they have. For example, suppose one moves forward. Notice that it has now support by the other pawn. That's nice to have coordination in chess, to be moving your pieces about and have them protected. We have this exact case right here. And this pawn here, what we might regard as a head pawn, is now controlling two new squares that are now deeper in the enemy position, and that could be quite annoying to the enemy side, taking away those squares. And similarly, we could move forward with this pawn. We have the support, and we're controlling two squares deeper into the enemy position. So it's very nice to have a pawn duo, not only because of the squares they control, but also because of the flexibility they have. Maybe one day he moves forward, maybe one day he moves forward, or maybe you don't move at all. Maybe you keep your opponent guessing as to which pawn advance you'll make, or maybe you won't make any pawn advance at all and just leave them simply sitting. They are a big deal in chess, this pawn duo, so much so that nearly every chess opening will address a pawn duo, will combat a pawn duo, challenge a pawn duo. Okay, we're going to see this in action soon enough. Let me just point out that beyond this pawn duo, the one with the D and E pawn, that is the most common pawn duo, that ideal pawn duo, the D and E pawn. The next most common is this one right here. These are the two most frequent pawn duos you will see in chess. A C and D pawn duo, and also this D and E pawn duo. Okay, those are the two pawn duos I'm going to focus on the most. If we have a look at this pawn duo right here, this is not as common, and one reason for this, just a very quick reason, is because this F pawn will often like to stay home, because what's most likely to happen in the game, what's most common when it comes time to get our king castled, he likes to castle kingside. That's easily done. There's only two pieces that need to be cleared out, compared to castling queenside, where you would need to move three pieces. So when we castle kingside, we would really like to have these three pawns stay home, so it's not as weakening. To have your pawns close to your king is a nice home for your king. It's the best arrangement to have your pawns close to your king. Moving this pawn up here, having this type of a pawn duo, contributing or having your C pawn contribute to forming a pawn duo, a C and D pawn structure, this is quite common and not going to be weakening once you castle on the king side. So let's have a look at some examples here of this in action. Let's see what I mean again when I say build a combative structure and develop efficiently. The first example actually is a terrible example from Black's perspective. I just wanted to show you an example here where Black is ignorant to something. Black is being ignorant right now to White's forming of a pawn duo. Black is going about development of their minor pieces, usually a very good idea to go towards the center, but what good is a piece developed towards the center if it cannot be maintained there? And what we're soon going to see here is that Black is going to get kicked around. This knight's being attacked. He has to go elsewhere. If he goes here, well, now he will be dead soon enough. He's trapped. He has to go home. The other knight's getting kicked around, and White is getting developed, and before you know it, this knight here is going to be cooked. He's going to be dead. Now, I realize this is a very exaggerated example I showed here, but my main point of emphasis was to show that if you don't do something about a pawn duo, things could seriously go wrong for you in a big, big way. Okay, we're going to see much more, better examples where we combat a structure. So let's start with this one right here. Suppose the game starts off with e4. What White can do next is simply form a pawn duo. Now, how can we interfere with this? How can we combat this idea? How can we look to challenge this pawn duo? Well, this example that I'm showing right now is a direct way to deal with one side forming a pawn duo. What do I mean by this? Well, let's see. In response to e4, in response to this move, we can follow up with e5. And this is a direct way to deal with the forming of a pawn duo, because as soon as this pawn is on board, black could simply snap that pawn right off, take it right out. We get a couple developing moves in. We're moving towards the center. We're getting our minor pieces out. After this d4 move, white has a pawn duo, but black is able to take it right out. After this recapture, black, let me just pause right here for a moment. What has black done? They have combated, they've challenged white's pawn duo. Okay, they've broken that up, and from here, we're looking to get all of our pieces out, develop efficiently, we're not wasting any time. And I'm just going to go, in each of these examples, I'm just going to go 10 moves in just to give you a feel for how the pieces can be coming out. Both sides are castled. Neither side has moved the same piece more than once in the opening. If play was to continue, a rook playing here would be nice, a bishop coming out here, maybe the queen stepping up, the rook coming over on this half-open file. Getting all of our pieces out and contributing is the name of the game. Now let's look at another example here, one where it is yet again a direct way to meet a pawn duo. After e4, what's another direct way to deal with one side threatening to form a pawn duo? Well, we could play c5. As soon as this move is played and white has a pawn duo, black is there to take it right out. But first, let's get a couple more developing moves in, and now we have d4. Black is in a perfect position to do what? Break it up. Combat that pawn duo. Pawn takes, knight takes, and we're going to now look to develop efficiently. Notice, if black is not taking right here and doing something else, well, this knight, he's usually really well placed if he's towards the center like this, but he's going to have to find a new home. That pawn will kick him away. But black breaks up that pawn duo. And what do we do from here? We get our pieces out. We're not looking to waste any time. We're not moving multiple pieces in the early stage of the game. There'll be exceptions to every rule, of course, but generally speaking, we're looking to get all of our pieces out efficiently without wasting any time. Again, just going 10 moves in. If play was to continue, this would be a nice move. This one would be a nice move as a follow-up for the white side, getting to half-open files or open files for our rooks. Let's have a look at, covered some direct ways to deal with the pawn duo. Let's have a look at some indirect ways. I'll also be providing in this video, well, actually what we could already observe from these two examples and what we'll see in each ensuing example from now on is that we never obstruct our central pawns. We don't put pawns, if I'm to just go back to that other example here, this one here, after we had this c5 move, you'll notice we're not obstructing our center pawns. We're not moving pieces in front of our center pawns. We want to allow them freedom of movement. We want to be able to maybe one day create a pawn duo. We can't do that if we're blocking them in. So a good rule of thumb is to simply not block your central pawns. Okay. Additionally, there are some other things I would like to share with you. For example, in this this game right here, suppose after d4, d5, I misspoke when I said this was a indirect way of dealing with the pawn duo. This is another direct way to deal with a pawn duo. If your opponent starts with the d4, you could hit that pawn head on and play d5. So now, if your opponent tries to form a pawn duo like this, you can take it out. In this example, it's going with c4 forming a pawn duo. Black is in a perfect position to simply break it up and capture. However, in this example, it does something different. Playing e6, being in a position to meet pawn takes pawn with, the pawn recapturing and now being in a position to once again prevent white from forming a pawn duo. Okay. However, in this example, we don't have this capture right here. Instead, we're looking to now get some development in. We're looking to develop efficiently. Black has been successful with building a combative structure. We're looking to get our pieces out, our minor pieces out, and getting castled. We have this c-pawn playing a role here. Now, this is a very interesting moment. There's something that I would like to emphasize that I think is going to be quite useful when it comes time for you to play the opening stage of the game. And it runs as follows. Here's a good general principle to follow. And that is, if you and or your opponent has their d-pawn on their 4th rank, which is the case right here. Both sides, in fact, have their d-pawns on the 4th rank. If you and or your opponent has their d-pawn on their 4th rank, the c-pawn will very often like to advance. Okay, we're seeing this in action right now, and I'm referring to that phrase right now, and I don't want you to simply memorize it. I'm going to provide reasons for why that is a good idea. Okay, there are plenty of reasons. I will be just scratching the surface with the few that I share with you. One reason to do this is, well, for one, you may be wanting to form a pawn duo of your own. This last move, this 4th move by Black, is doing just that. They're forming a pawn duo. Additionally, you'll notice this move is striking at the opponent's d-pawn, striking at the opponent's pawn duo. You could also, I said that the c-pawn will like to advance. If you or your opponent has their d-pawn on their 4th rank, the c-pawn will very often like to advance. Sometimes you may not want to strike at your opponent's center, but you would like to maybe reinforce your own center. Okay? The main point here is to simply not obstruct your c-pawn. He will very often like to contribute in the game. In fact, these 3 pawns, these guys here, the starting point of the game, the c, d, and e pawns are the pawns that move the most in a chess game. They are most frequently moved. In this game, he's playing to c5. One additional reason for this is that it opens up a diagonal for the queen. Notice when that c-pawn is up, the queen has some new prospects coming out in this direction. 3 possibilities for the queen and 3 possibilities for each side's queen. Okay, so just keep that in mind. If you and or your opponent has their d-pawn on their 4th rank, the c-pawn will very often like to advance. So don't be so quick to block it in with, for example, doing something like this, moving your knight to this c6 square. Yeah, it's a developing move, but it's kind of awkward now to clear out your pieces. Okay, it's kind of stuck. Maybe you want to get your queen out here first. It's important to get that c-pawn working. So we'll see that in ensuing examples and getting the c-pawn working. But just following through with this example, we're getting our pieces out. We're getting castled. We're not wasting any time. Just going 10 moves in here. And if play was to continue, rook's getting to these half-open files, and this bishop coming out, this queen may be coming out like so. Hopefully you're getting the idea here. Let's have a look at a few. Now this is I mean it this time when I say let's have a look at some indirect ways that we can be combating a pawn structure. Let's have a look at this one right here. Starting out with e4. Our opponent can play c6. This is an indirect way to approach a pawn duo. Opponent builds this pawn duo. What are we going to do? We can't break it up right away, but we can confront it. We can challenge it by playing pawn to d5. We're doing something about this. This pawn duo no longer has the flexibility it would have if it was not challenged. White isn't able to go here or here when there's a d-pawn right here challenging it. Okay, it's not as flexible anymore. In this particular example, we're going to have the capture, and now following up, we're going to be developing efficiently. Notice we have one or more D pawns. What was the phrase exactly? If you and or your opponent has their D pawn on their 4th rank, as is the case right here, the C pawn will very often like to advance. We're seeing an example right now where the C pawn is advancing and reinforcing this D4 pawn. Moving forward, we're getting our pieces out, and we're getting castled. We're not wasting any time. Again, just going 10 moves in. This is as far as I want to take it. Half open file as ensuing moves. And let's have a look at a few more examples here, just 3 more examples as a close here. This one now starting out with D4. This is another example of an indirect way of dealing with a pawn duo. We could have, well, as soon as it's formed, it's confronted head-on like this with D5. We're getting some development in here. And I'd like to also draw your attention to something that just happened right there. These last few moves that just took place here. This is an important detail. I referenced that we don't want to block our central pawns with our pieces. Another thing I want you to keep in mind is the relationship between our pawns and our bishops. I want you to focus on move order a little bit, thinking maybe just 2 moves ahead. And this will draw our attention to timing just a little bit. Notice this move here by white, bishop to g5. Black makes a castling move. We have a couple pawn captures, and then we make the move e3. We know in the game we want to get both of our bishops out at some point, but in what order should they be played? Should we try to get this guy out here and then move this bishop? Well, notice if we do that, if we play this move first, he's kind of stuck. This right here is regarded as a pawn chain. Just a couple terms here. Black has this small little pawn chain here, and this is white's little pawn chain. If we can, we would really like to get this bishop outside of the pawn chain, where he is not obstructed, where he's not blocked in by his own pawns. We can't always do this, but if we can do it, we would like to get him out and about before we block him in. So there's a little bit of coordination to be thinking about, in other words. So that's why this bishop comes out, and only then do we have this move e3. So keep this in mind, the relationship between pawn structure and your bishops. Okay, so just moving forward, getting a few more pieces involved, only going 10 moves in. We're really not wasting any time. And as a follow-up move, we could maybe go with something like this, and just getting the queen out maybe here at some point, maybe playing something like a5. That's getting into a little bit of a plan, but this is as far as I want to take it. Minor pieces out, getting castled. We're not wasting any time. Let's look at just 2 more examples. One where we begin with e4. Another indirect way to deal with a pawn duo is to start with e6, and after the pawn duo is formed, you're confronting it with d5. Okay, it loses its flexibility, not as many options now. Black has combated the pawn structure, combated the pawn duo. We have a couple captures, and the name of the game here is getting our pieces out to active squares and getting our kings castled. Once again, a case where we have 1 or more D pawns on the 4th rank. If you and or your opponent has their D pawn on their 4th rank, the C pawn will very often like to advance. We're having these guys advance. They're both reinforcing the D pawns, and we're getting our rooks to half open files or open files. And let's have a look at just one more example here. One where we don't have the opening up of files so easily. We need to work a little bit sometimes in order to allow our rooks to play. Okay, so in this example, we're once again seeing this pawn duo being confronted, but instead of this capture now, we're going to have this advance. And all the examples up to this point that I've shown, I was going in for a variation or move sequences where I made a pawn capture, but suppose there aren't pawn captures made what do we do in such a situation here? Because one day we want to get our rooks working, but we need pawn breaks. That earlier point I made when I said to not only create and or challenge a pawn duo, but to also make a pawn break if needed. Well, in this position, it's needed. If we're not making a pawn break, our rooks will not be playing an active role. So we need to look to make a pawn break, and black can do that right now on move 3 with playing c5, striking at the d-pawn. We're once again seeing a case where we have the d-pawns on the 4th rank, one or more d-pawns on the 4th rank here. C-pawn will very often like to move. It's moving yet again, and another reason this might be a good idea is because what? It's forming a pawn duo. Okay, so this is going to be helpful to our rooks, of course. It's going to have a capture at some stage. A rook can be well placed then on the c-file, and we'll be able to get all our pieces out and about. We'll be able to develop efficiently. Play might continue as follows. In fact, we're seeing yet another way to make a pawn break, striking here. We're making a pawn advance that will result in a pawn capture and the opening up of a file. Getting some more developing moves in. We're getting castled, getting all of our pieces out. Again, I'm just going 10 moves in here, and this is as far as I want to take it. If play was to continue, rook here, knight here, rook here, you get the idea. Hopefully these are some good examples. Just again going 10 moves in, minor pieces out, just a very quick summary here. Taking it from the top, what did we look to do here in each of these examples? We look to build a combative structure and develop efficiently, to create and or challenge a pawn duo, to make a pawn break if needed. Developing efficiently, I'm talking about moving, again, pieces to active squares, getting castled, not wasting time. Don't block your central pawns. Recognize the relationship between your bishops and your pawns, trying to get your bishop outside of your pawn chain. Coordinate your bishops, in other words, with your pawns. If you and or your opponent has their d-pawn on their 4th rank, the c-pawn will very often like to advance. And some reasons for why that is the case, you may be wanting to advance your c-pawn again to form a pawn duo of your own, a c and d-pawn duo. You may want to strike at your opponent's d-pawn. You may want to simply protect your own d-pawn, and you're also, by moving your c-pawn, you're giving your queen some breathing space. You're allowing your queen to come out along a diagonal, and I'm sure there are more reasons, but I think that's enough. That's more than enough to get us going here in the opening stage of the game. Okay, so that's all for this video. We'll see what happens in video 6, and as always, I hope you got something out of this video. Take care. Bye.